Advanced Skyver. Let's talk about this comic book, Blammo number 9. One of my most popular issues of Blammo, my long-running comic book series, based off of the comics that used to come out in the 80s and 90s from like Fantagraphics books. This is like my one-man anthology comic, so it is just like a mixture of short stories and humor strips and autobiography and stuff like that. This issue I drew while I was at the Center for Cartoon Studies in White River Junction, Vermont. And this was published in 2016. And around 2015 and 16, I was really like having like a pretty awesome artistic moment where people were really starting to pay attention to what I was doing, and I was getting a lot of respect from artists who normally wouldn't even talk to me. I was getting like all of a sudden a lot of attention, and I really was like, all right, I'm onto something. That has since faded. Nobody cares anymore about me. But let's go through and look at this issue. This comic book was really popular when it came out. We did 2 printings of it, which is unheard of for small press comics. So in here I have the letters page. This is an ongoing joke. I always talk about how I'm going to stop doing comics and become an electrician. And a little self-portrait at the Fantagraphics table when the Disquiet came out, and I was selling it at TCAF. Each issue of Blammo, I always had like an author photo that would go along with the time period that the issue was published. So we have here is a letter from Joe Ullman, awesome Canadian cartoonist, and a letter from Jason Young about the book St. Cole I was working on. And I published this because he said something in here that actually really helped me with storytelling and something I think about all the time. And it's a quote from Kurt Vonnegut. Let's see, where is it? So Kurt Vonnegut says, the first thing he tells his students asking him advice on writing is to make your characters want something. That way, no matter how fucked up their behavior or actions are, they're still relatable to the reader. I think about that all the time. Once he wrote to me and said that, I was like, you're right. Like, to boil down a story, it's basically somebody wants something, and we're watching them try and get that. That, like, really helped me a lot. And now I always think about when I'm writing a comic, like, what does this character want? Like, what's going on? What is this even about? So it really helped me out, and I had to publish that in there. Tom Gold, Jim Rugg of Cartoonist Kayfabe, Shaw. And then down here is a letter from R. Crumb about My Hot Date. A really awesome letter to get at the time. So, first story, you always kind of have like an introductory comic in Blammo before you dive into like the meat of the issue. And this was like just a dumb, weird, surreal humor comic about where Blammo comes from. Turns out it's actually written by a head in a cave with an old man. All right. 19th century cartoonist. This was just kind of to talk about my love of 19th century cartooning and 20th century cartooning history, and to make fun of how backwards people were at the time. That era. This became like one of my most popular stories because, well, it was, for one thing, it was the beginning of me drawing myself with a mustache, which I still do, and became kind of a signature cartooning style. But it's so interesting because my cartooning has already improved since then, so it's weird to look at. But people like this, I think, because it was like based off my experience of living in Vermont and how I felt kind of out of place there with younger cartoonists and with the newer scene. And also I was reflecting a lot for the first time on my past growing up in the Mormon church. So it was the story about being in that scene in White River Junction, and then, juxtaposed with growing up as a Mormon, this was the first time I was dealing with that. And then after this, I would go on to explore that even deeper with One Dirty Tree, the graphic novel that I did. So yeah, so I don't really have a feeling like I need to reprint this story if I ever collected these autobio stories, because it's kind of mean. I don't know. I wish I could have done it differently now, and I don't know. Like it's not. It's an interesting story, but it's not that kind. The best part of it is probably Steve Bissett. So, so it ends with this. I can't even turn this with one hand. Ends with this page here. So interesting little story here. I colored this illustration so we could use it as a print for Kilgore to sell. So we did these like limited edition prints of this drawing. And at the time I was posting a lot of my illustrations on Facebook, and Gary Panter was like, hey, you should try and do something for the New Yorker. And I was like, ha, that's funny, yeah, right. So he is like, no, seriously. And he got me in contact with Francois Mouly, and she said, let me see some of your work. And I sent her a bunch of illustrations, and the colored version of this was one of them. And she wrote back and said, hey, I'd like to use this illustration for the cover of the New Yorker. Has it been published before? And then suddenly I had this crazy dilemma. Like, do I tell her the truth? Because if I lie to her, I can have an illustration on the cover of the New Yorker. However, if she finds out that I was lying to her, that'll be the end of my opportunities to work with her. She'll probably be really mad. So I slept on it. I decided the next morning I was going to have to tell her the truth. I did. I told her, that's a panel from Blammo. But if you want, I'll redraw it. It'd be great. I would really love the opportunity to be in the New Yorker. And she never wrote back to me. So I blew my chance. It's horrible. So this is a true story that my dad told me that I illustrated. It's a ghost story. Pretty creepy. 19th century cartoonist featuring the Yellow Kid. The main fiction here, every issue of Blammo I try to have like at least one big fiction story. And so this is this one, Little Bomber Summer Period, about a guy who lives alone and is idolizing a specific painter and starts to try and paint like him. And his friend who also works at the museum, what's going on with her life and their relationship as friends. How her relationship is falling apart because her boyfriend's cheating on her or something. I have to reread it. I can't remember. I haven't reprinted any of the stuff in Blammo's really. I'm besides like best of like Youth is Wasted and that book Disquiet, which just like reprints like a couple stories from Blammo. But for the most part, the series is like its own thing, and I don't really touch it. And I haven't really reprinted like a short story collection using this or like the other stuff that's in the newer issues. So there's that story. Another true story from my father about how he was a boy and he found all these praying mantis eggs. He didn't know what they were, so he put them in his pocket and went home. And then he came home from school one day and there were praying mantises all over his bedroom. He had to vacuum them up. The town mouse and the country mouse. This was just a leftover story that I had, and I needed some pages to fill in this comic, so I published this one. Comics Festival 2016. Sort of a fake story about doing a lot of conventions. Based off of, what was that movie called? No, I can't remember. But it's based off of a movie, but I can't remember what it is. Sorry. It's Jack Cohen from Fantagraphics. I wonder if she probably doesn't like that. Also, who else is in here? Let's see if I can. So we have Josh Cotter, and then sort of like an Ivan Brunetti type. We're hanging out when we go swimming. And then I see visions of death. Another 19th century cartoonist. This is like the final one, like his death, and then how he's remembered, which is not very well. Turns out he wasn't that great of a cartoonist. And the writer and the artist. The end, just like a end piece with the same characters from the very beginning of the issue. And then the back cover, which is like the inside back cover, which is like all, you'll have like ads and like plugs for artists you like. And then I'm like making fun of experimental cartoonists at the time, who I was always seeing like comics that just look like that with like gradients and like a piece of pizza with a witch hat and like a diamond. It was just like so much of that stuff at that time. And the back cover, which is a reflection on my life, I guess. Yeah. So looking at this, it was kind of the beginning of a new direction that I was going to go in cartooning, and yeah, and I'm turning 36 years old on Tuesday, and today I've been feeling like I wasted my life or I didn't live up to my potential or something. I've had a weird day so far. I don't like I don't like this time marching forward without me really feeling like I even did anything with my life. So